Hello and welcome to Radio Free Nintendo. It's opening day and we're here to talk about America's pastime, baseball. I'm joined today by John Lindemann. John, what's your team looking like this year?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. You fucking bandwagon ass fan over here.
The bandwagon since 1991. So yes, I was on the bandwagon in 91. So.
That was almost always good in that time.
That's right.
There was never a time to get
Real
off.
fans pick the Oakland Athletics, John. Real fans of competition.
Weren't the A's also good around that time?
They might have been.
Well, the A's were good in the late 80s. When the Braves were actually absolutely terrible.
Yeah, because the Reds got the A's in 90...
90?
Yeah, 90. Yeah,
it was 90.
Yes. Speaking of being a long-suffering fan, that is the only World Series I've ever seen. And, in fact, it's the only playoff wins I've ever seen. Yeah. Fuck sucks. But hey, they won today in convincing fashion.
I've watched more playoff losses than you've watched playoff games.
But that's not hard because we went like 15 years. So.
Yeah.
Well, we had a little stretch there in the middle 2000s. But yeah, it sucks. It sucks. Being a Reds fan is pain, but that's how I'm a good fan because I suffer through it and I just go like, yeah, let's see what horrible thing an announcer's going to say on the radio today. Greg, how's opening day treating you?
Oh, they're pretty good. Some of the games got rained out, so I saw less than I had hoped.
Yes. And Guillaume, I know you're a huge fan of the sport. Do you even know I guess I did say the name of the sport, so we're good there.
Sure, I'm just waiting for the Expos to come back.
Any day now.
The previous Montreal mayor was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll make them come back, but then he was beaten by a woman who just, instead of baseball, she wanted bike paths. And so
gross.
So
gross. Typical. But like you could have had I don't know what you would have it's not going to be sausages. I'm not sure what people could wear at fanciful costumes and run around the stadium in races in Quebec. I don't think a poutine costume is going to work.
Right. We don't have poutine mobiles or anything like that, so I don't know.
But you could if you had a baseball team.
That's true.
What if they had an air gun that shot poutine out into the audience?
Mm-hmm. That would probably be very scalding, and yeah, there would probably be lawsuits.
Look, sometimes you get a delicious snack. Sometimes you have the wife and mother of multiple children knocked off the top of an arena and killed. It's as you'd say, swings and roundabouts. It's fine. I don't know why I managed to get a Simpsons reference in, but that's fine. This is March 28th, which it being opening day and also NCAA tournament day has been bad for me in general, but that's okay. I'm good. I got to watch an 8-2 win. I'm happy. And this is episode 868, I believe. Yes. I received no emails about Microsoft's Big Dick Blender being an episode title, which I thought, there's a chance. So we must go further is the answer to that problem. And we're going to start the show off with new business. And so to start off new business, I'm going to go ahead and have Greg kick us off.
I was wondering if he was going to say the questions were about the title, like, is it the blender of someone who's insecure about their dick size, or is it a blender exclusively for the purpose of handling big dicks?
I mean...
That's all it blends.
Greg, why would you blend big dicks?
No, actually, I can answer that. Let's say you are very, very insecure about your dick size. Having a device that takes other people down to size might be your evil genius plan.
Some people just want to watch the world burn, by which I mean have their genitals placed in a blender.
But wouldn't it be easier, instead of seeking big dicks to blend in your big dick blender, to blend your own not so big dick and then just pretend that you blended a big dick? It's like, oh yeah, like I went through the blender. That's proof that I was huge.
Well, I mean, I guess if you owned, I guess you could buy the big dick blender and then people would assume that because you have a big dick blender that you had a big dick.
Like, I just want to be clear that
It's-
big dick was more of a state of mind when it was said.
Yes.
It wasn't.
Yes.
It wasn't
That's-
specifically about dick measuring.
You
Don't
were
be
Because-
so
you
literal,
were thinking
guys.
about-
Don't be so literal.
You were thinking about Big Blender Energy. BBE. Yeah.
I was thinking, big blender energy. I was thinking about like bringing a Ferrari up on stage with it's like one of four.
Yeah, the point
and
is,
then
like,
just-
if Microsoft made a blender, it's not going to be a modest one, is it?
no, it's going to be like you can blend your own Xbox in this. It's like, why would I want to do that? So you can get a new Xbox. It's like, okay, well that's.
And they've got to drive sales somehow. It's got challenging.
They'd walk up and go, "This brick is made of pure uranium. We're gonna blend it." It's like, sir, I would prefer you not do that while I'm in company. Look how good this is. Look how good these blades are. Just cutting through that uranium, liquefying it, turning it into a powder, and ejecting that powder into the air. Also, you're all gonna need medical treatment, which we can do with
Just ignore the
Microsoft's-
poisoning.
Microsoft's big dick radiology gun.
You've got a rich internal,
Yeah,
world.
well, no, I mean, I'm just like Microsoft's always looking for new fields they can enter. Are you telling me that Microsoft's radiation treatment administration device would be anything less than the most potent, dangerously potent? It's like this is the most like we don't actually want you to make them more powerful, not more power, more. We've heard that developers want more power. This one, so much power. It's like this is dangerous to be in the same room with. No, it's fine. Don't worry about it. This is the Microsoft of your future. The Microsoft nation state that's making large radiological guns and calling them medical equipment.
I'm looking forward to Microsoft's entry into healthcare. It's probably going to be a lot like those ads in RoboCop, except they're going to start with exclusive.
I'm just trying to think like for Microsoft to be a fully functioning nation state, they do need a military of some description.
Oh God, yes.
We have the largest guns. They're so heavy. People can't even pick them up. There's just a bunch of pictures of people in fatigues, like dragging a gun behind them. So powerful. If one goes off and it just leaves a giant crater, look at this. No one will mess with us. It's like, this is completely unnecessary.
It just leaves a Forza car in its wake in a crater.
It just shoots Forza cars. We're going to do new business. Speaking of shooting cars out into dangerous places. And Greg, you've got some stuff from the eShop.
Yeah, well, I've not been playing terribly much new lately. You've got the Pepper Grinder game that just came out. That's of some
Nice.
interest to me, because I did get around to playing the demo a little bit after it went up, and I was pretty pleased with that. And you've seen Neil's review on the site today and all that, so it seems quite promising. I might get to that shortly. But in terms of things I've actually played, yeah, a lot of NSO type stuff. I've been playing some Mario Golf on the Game Boy, part of the service, because obviously, yeah, you got N64 Mario Golf there, or various other golf options, but I'd never played this one really to any great extent. I played the GBA game. Talked about that on the show hundreds of episodes ago. But the 8-bit version, it's got a bit more of its own kind of flavor. Like the GBA one, as I recall, many years ago that I played it, was a little bit more at that point, GBA was good enough, I guess, graphically to try and do some like pre-render, kind of approximations of what the console games look like. Whereas
Sort of, yeah.
with GBC, it's more like, no, it just has to have its own kind of look because it's so low res, it's so basic. But nowadays there's almost something a bit more sort of charming, a bit more kind of to admire about that than there is about something that was, technically kind of a closer approximation, but still in retrospect not that close. But there's something also I like about the simplicity of this kind of golf game. You're thinking about also stuff like NES Open Tournament Golf or stuff like that, where like the problem I can have with golf games as they get more sophisticated, and this it would apply even maybe to certain sim more simulation-minded golf games that were on things like the Mega Drive or the Super Nintendo even, is just that the more information there is, it can get to a point where I just agonize over it a lot. You know, it's just like, okay, well, you know, especially with putting. Putting is, you know, like when you get a proper kind of view of the green and there's loads of different breaks, and then it's like, add on this much, yeah, how many feet do you add on for how uphill it is, and then you've got this break at this part, but then it breaks the other way after that. Like with this, it's so simple. In a way, it is kind of frustrating. It's like, well, do I know what the hell to do? It's just like, you just aim a little bit outside the cup, this side, go. And you just, the whole thing is like that, really, with the, you know, driving, approach shots, all of it's pretty fat. It can happen fast, you know what I mean? Like, you could take more time over it because there is enough information there, certainly much more so than something like, you know, NES Golf, the original, where you had to, like, work out the distances yourself because it was just like, okay, you know, they didn't have much information at all except, like, you know, the overall size of the hole and what clubs you were using. But, you know, it's been kind of interesting. Someone who's played a lot of Mario Golf games years ago to see this one, and, you know, the kind of, obviously the RPG kind of elements of going around on a overworld and finding little challenges to do that yield experience, as well as, you know, just competing in the tournaments and match play games and so forth. So, yeah, nice to, give that a go. And a little NSO note I forgot to mention, I think, when I talked about Blastcore with the N64 stuff, they did address that issue with Jet Force Gemini and its non-anamorphic widescreen in the update that went up, that brought Blastcore to it. Yeah, they did actually fix that. So that's you know, good on them for addressing that. Like I said, Jet Force Gemini is not the most convenient game to play portably the way it controls anyway. No. So I don't know how much I will, you know, avail myself of it, but a little more likely now that that's been addressed. I was kind of hoping it would be. But yeah, more NSO stuff. So we had a kind of 1-2 punch of F-Zero. So F-Zero Maximum Velocity, as it was called in America and Europe, the launch day game for the GBA from the F-Zero series, which I believe in Japan, as the box art would suggest on the Japanese app for NSO, was simply called F-Zero for Game Boy Advance. It was they didn't actually give it a subtitle.
Wow, yes. Remarkably creative naming.
Yeah, so that was, yeah, they announced that was finally coming out, because it is like the last game that was sort of promised, I think, that hadn't come out, at least in our territory. I don't know whether there was one game outstanding for something else. And in some cases, they've released things that weren't previously promised, like Blastcore, for instance. But this was one that had been promised when I think they originally announced GBA games are coming to expansion pack over a year ago, whatever it's been now, and it hadn't happened. And of course, you know, when F-Zero 99 came along, it was kind of like, I wonder, you know, they're just going to hold off on that for a good, perhaps a good while. But here they kind of tried to tie them together a little bit. So it was like, we've got the GBA game coming to the expansion pack of the NSO, but we're also doing a pretty substantial update to F-Zero 99. It was kind of nice to see they're still putting some sort of level of effort into the updates here, not just like trivial kind of rearranging of things. Obviously, it's not that substantial, but still, like, you've got mirror tracks coming and mirror Grand Prix coming, where the mirroring is not exact. It's not just a duplicate where you turn the other way. You do actually have different hazards at different places. So your boost pads, mines, ramps, all that kind of stuff. So it's a light remix in addition to the mirroring that's going on. And then they've also expanded the classic component of the game. So this is something they added in a previous update, where it's like, okay, let's make it more like the original F-Zero that clearly the game is already based on. But for instance, the big thing is it has like spin attack and the boost system of F-Zero X. And in classic mode, it's like, okay, we bring the tracks back into the more original proportions that weren't designed for, 99 cars, obviously. And you have the original boost, sort of limited 1 per lap earned sort of boost format, and no spin attacks. And so they've had that for a while, but now you're actually going to get like little 3-race mini Grand Prix of the classic tracks. And you can also do time attack in practice mode on the classic tracks as well. So that's nice, because it has, if for any reason you now and again want to break from the sort of more chaotic nature of the full on F-Zero 99 and more play, a mode that's more like just Super Nintendo F-Zero with online added, like the classic mode is kind of nice for that. But you have quite limited opportunities here, because it just comes up every now and again, as an alternate mode. It's not always available. But now, at least with the practice mode, that's always available. And they've got this mini classic pre in the kind of rotation as well. So all of that's nice. And they keep, because obviously it's a game that it depends entirely on people playing it with some frequency. And
right.
The difference when you play an F-Zero 99 race, when it's mostly bots, is very palpable. Like, it's just nowhere near as mad for a start, The bots are relatively meek compared to the way that people just, kind of recklessly boost and, throw themselves at other, because the thing is, if you kill another player, it not only extends your health bar, but it refills it. So there is an incentive there to boost like a madman and then get a kill to fill it back up. And the bots don't really behave like that. You need some of these periodic updates to get people back in and keep it alive. And so it's nice. Obviously you can't, you're not going to be able to reverse all of the drop off in the number of players with stuff like this. By any means, but certainly you can at least give it a little bump and slow the kind of further decline that will inevitably come. But with the GBA game, it went up about an hour ago here or so. So I did play it for a little bit. I haven't really played it very much since GBA launch, which was a long time ago, obviously. So because they've been back then. There were a lot of F-Zero games, funnily enough. Like, there was another 2 GBA games. There was another, it hadn't been that long since F-Zero X, and GX would come along a couple of years later. So, yeah, I don't know, maybe I would have played it more if I wasn't complacent about these things. But I did like it back then. It felt like it was, kind of a return to the more, the Super Nintendo style after F-Zero X was quite different, which, there's good and bad with that, because you lose some of that, chaotic, crazy energy and the real intense sensation of speed that F-Zero X brought. But, you had more kind of, an emphasis on cornering and kind of less craziness, basically, that the Super Nintendo game had, with, some touches that were kind of specific to that game, like the sort of extra parallax layer of Mode 7, was quite nice. I always liked that. Just made the fake 3D feel, a little bit more involved, than just the single layer being rotated around that you had with Super Nintendo F-Zero. But the main thing that I always remember about it, which certainly has just been, refreshed by my time with it just now, is the fact that for whatever reason, and I'll never understand what drove this, or if it was an accident or what, from a design point of view, the optimal way to take a corner with losing the least amount of speed is to feather the accelerator rather than to use the brake. And so at times, if you'd got the later courses with some very, twisty turny kind of designs and so forth, you're just battering the shit out of that accelerator button. That's how I remember it. And I did not skip straight to the more advanced stuff, but even in the first cup, it was just for whatever reason, just braking to, bring your speed under control and take the turn. It's not that you lose more speed and, depending on how fast acceleration acceleration you've got on your car, that it could take a while to get back up to top speed, whereas that feathering method is much more efficient. And I don't know why if there was a very deliberate ploy to make people, test the robustness of their launch stage EBA buttons, or what was going on there, because it's not a feature of the Super Nintendo game, that it's most directly patterned on, or F-Zero X. So it's kind of strange, but, I remember it being a solid, yes, this is delivering on the purpose of, you have a Super Nintendo style racing game, up to a certain level of quality on your portable, and that was impressive, in 2001. I guess it'll be interesting to see how long, or if at all, we get the other, GBA F-Zero games, one of which, GP Legend, I guess, did come to, outside of Japan. And the other, the last one is one of the only F-Zero games I haven't played outside of like Satellaview and 64DD expansion kit stuff. Was, Japan exclusive in about 2005, I want to say. It'd be nice if that got released. I mean, they've done Japan exclusive things on the Japanese version of the NSO app, because we've got, of course, Mother 3, but even also the Fire Emblem game that didn't get localized, that's on there. So it seems possible, and I would very much like to see that. But yeah, with the kind of supporting F-Zero 99 and stuff, I feel like it could be a while. And I guess the other question is, when will they show another tranche of games? Because they've run out of the ones that they had previously promised, or will they even bother, with this new this piecemeal approach that we've already seen applied to things like, the run up to Mario vs. Donkey Kong remake and Princess Peach Showtime. You kind of take that into the NSO kind of thing now, and just drip them out however you like.
Yeah, I mean, the fact it's literally one game this time is not promising. And I don't mean one game for this system. I mean, this entire release is a single game.
Yeah. Obviously, with the Mario Day ones, they had 3 at once, but especially with one of them being Dr. Mario.
I mean, it would be different if we're getting games every week, but we're not.
No, that was couple weeks, sort of like 2 weeks plus, was it roughly? Yeah, you'd like to see it kind of regularize it a little bit more. So it does feel a bit kind of cobbled together at the minute, but they've still got lots and lots of stuff of it. That's the thing, especially GBA. There's a lot of N64. It's a little bit harder. You feel like they'd have to go a bit further afield,
faster.
Which they've already done. They're already going a little bit further afield by having something like Blast Corps, which was never on a virtual console, as far as I can recall. The only rare stuff that got on virtual console was Donkey Kong Country, and DK64 specifically, for the N64 on Wii U. They're already having to do it. But with GBA, there's so much. They haven't even done Wario Land 4. Or, loads of stuff. So, and Metroid Zero Mission we've talked about before. So, lots to, hopefully come with some sort of reasonable kind of rhythm to it. But, I imagine I'll, get a little bit more out of Maximum Velocity just to refresh my recollection of it. But, having F-Zero 99 get refreshed at the same time does make it less likely that I'll sort of spend as much time as I might have done with it.
Cool. Anything else?
No, I think that'll do nicely.
All right, fair enough. All right, John, do you have anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about Titanfall 2. I reinstalled that just for old time's sake. Man, all I can say is that game is so good. Pretty much for anybody listening who is unfamiliar with Titanfall 2, since, it's funny, it's actually come out. It came out in 2016, and that game, it's kind of a relic at this point. It feels like a relic because there's certain things in there where, oh hey, click on this link for the latest news, and then you go to Respawn's website and it throws up a 404 at you. There's just things like that where you're like, wow, they really have abandoned this game, but it still has a healthy player base. You can still get matches really, really easily, even 8 years after. I think this game very much has a cult following, and I think there's a general pining across the internet for this game to get a sequel, for there to be a Titanfall 3. And certainly it would warrant it, even though, I'm always afraid of, if they did a Titanfall 3, would they just screw it up? There's always that.
It's been so long.
Yeah, it has been so long. But it's funny though, like the news, I think the last piece of news that they have on there is from November 2017, maybe. That's the last piece of news, and so wow, but I mean, it's a great game. The multiplayer is incredibly fast. The campaign is really cool. I think the last thing I haven't done on the campaign is just play through it at the hardest difficulty level. So I'm gonna kind of poke away at that.
It's really hard.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I don't think that it doesn't seem like they throw many more enemies at you, but the enemies you just die like that. Like if you take pretty much any sustained fire of any sort, you're dead.
You're just as vulnerable as they are, basically.
Yeah. And so yeah, it is difficult to go through. Like I've done all the collectibles, I got all that long ago, and the multiplayer it takes some getting used to, but it's very interesting multiplayer. It's very fast, and of course the big hook in this game is that you can effectively, hop into Optimus Prime pretty much and walk around.
Yeah.
In this huge mech. And the way the multiplayer works is you sort of build up credit. Like if you kill some enemies right out of the gate, you have a timer in order for you that you have to burn down in order to be able to drop your Titan, your mech, onto the field. And so, I think if you kill some enemies, that timer goes down quicker, allowing you to kind of get the edge on the other team. And then you can hop in there, and then you also have your normal weapons, your normal guns, and then you have an anti-Titan weapon, which is usually some sort of huge rocket launcher or something like that. And then you can also hijack these Titan mechs, and kill the pilot inside, and then take over their mech. So you can do a lot of really cool stuff. It plays really quickly, really smoothly. It's very easy to understand everything. The one cool thing that they do that you don't see very often is they have grunts, like NPCs that also kind of fight alongside you that are just sort of there, and they can kill you. So it's just kind of one more thing on the battlefield to watch out for. Sometimes you'll be engaged with another player and you'll kill that player, and then you don't even realize that there's just some random NPC grunt behind you, and it just picks you off, and you're like, okay. But you also get points for killing those grunts. So they're not just there as props. They actually can give you points. So you do collect points in this game, as well as kills and assists and stuff like that. And that helps in various game modes. But yeah, it's very, very cool. I would recommend it to anybody looking for a first-person shooter that's fast and fun and interesting. And also, what I like about it is it's not like you don't have to be an amazing player to have fun playing that game in multiplayer. Unlike something else I've been playing kind of recently, I've been going through some older first-person shooters. Halo Master Chief Collection, that game is pretty much played by savants at this point.
Yeah.
You play that game online, you get roasted in any mode. You just get roasted. To the point where, I'll have like 3 kills and the guy that's up at the top will have like 30. And it's like, okay. Like, I mean, you're coming out of the spawn point, you're dead. I mean, it is insane.
He'll have 30 against other people who are still playing that game.
Yeah, and that's just because you have these people who are, I mean, not only are they better players than me, but they've also been playing those Halo games, forever, I'm sure. 10 years, 15 years, you name it. So it's really, really tough. I love Halo Master Chief Collection, but man, that game in multiplayer, it's just get ready for hard times. That's all I can say. Unless you are already incredibly, incredibly good at those Halo games, just because the level of just sheer knowledge of how to play those games is so large in the community that it's very, very difficult to just jump in, especially if you're not used to the way because those games, from Halo, it's Halo 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then ODST and Reach, and all of those games, they all have kind of different control schemes, even though you can normalize that across all the games. But they feel very different, and feel is a big thing in first-person shooters. Some of the earlier ones are slower and clunkier, but then you have something like Halo 4, which almost plays more like Halo 5. It's very fast, and so I was much better at Halo 4 than I was at Halo 1, 2, and 3. I am absolutely terrible at those games, just because they just feel slow and clunky, and I just can't grok them, right? But getting back to Titanfall 2, yes, that's a fantastic game. You can get it for absolutely nothing at this point. And I think the DLC is
when I got
really
it
cheap.
4 years ago, I got it for like $3.
Yeah, it's like you can get it for like $5 or less, which is criminal. And it's actually on Game Pass at this point.
Yeah, and like
Xbox,
just to be clear, if you don't want to play multiplayer, unlike Titanfall 1, this one has an incredible single player campaign.
Yeah, it's a very good single player game. Yeah.
Like if you just play it for single player, you're at its current price is still a steal.
Yeah, it is. So, yeah, it's really good. I highly recommend it. So, and I've also been playing a little bit of Diablo 4, which is still hasn't really changed much aside from the fact that they try to upsell you on the seasonal stuff, and which I'm not dipping into. I'm just playing the campaign, but it's still fun. But that game, I feel like it's still kind of missing something. It sounds funny, but that game to me is almost a game that I play to relax because it's just kind of so zen. You just kind of walk around. It's not like Diablo 3 where it was more frenetic and more fast-paced. It's more kind of deliberately paced, and you just kind of walk around and kill some stuff, and then you go over here and you do a quest. It's just very chill, that game, which I didn't think I'd be saying about Diablo 4, but here we are. Still like that game. Still looks great, but yeah, it's very different from Diablo 3. So, but that's it. That's what I've been playing.
Cool. All right. I promised you all that I would not talk about Unicorn Overlord until I was done with Unicorn Overlord. And congratulations, I'm done with Unicorn Overlord, so welcome. I finished it on Tuesday. There was I beat the game on Sunday, and in the post game, it unlocks a couple things. You can go back and make a different decision, which is a relatively inconsequential decision, so it's certainly not worth doing. Before the main battle. It's just a decision you can make right before the main battle. You get a chance to change it and see what a different option is. You get the ability to refight the main battle, the last battle, okay. And you unlock this like weird post-game battle that's really it's not really tied to any story or anything. It's just like, we put all the characters on this giant fucking map. Have fun. And that's all the fight is. It's really just like every character is on both sides of the fight. And you can add some units, some non-player characters from the game story to your army. Doesn't do any good because there's no missions left to play after that unless you want to replay the main game or replay the main battle, or the final battle. So it's like, okay, well, that doesn't really get you anything except it's kind of cool. But I finished that mission and I saw a different version of the ending. And again, the decision in question is incredibly inconsequential. I think it changed like 5 boxes of text, and a different character was standing there at the end. Like it's almost nothing. And I only did that because I wanted to see the battle and I wanted to make my save a close save. But so what I talked about when I last spoke about this game was that I just felt like there was something about the open world that made the game worse. And I can now actually speak on that in more concrete terms. Because at some point, I had cleared out all the quests. So the world is, or the continent is 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. The world is 4 countries, and they've all been overtaken. And as you progress through the game, you effectively liberate all 4 countries, including Elaine's home country, which is where you start and where you end. Basically, you can do everything but the area around the capital. And then when you come back at the end of the game, you'll be at the right level to do the area around the capital and eventually the capital, and that's the closeout for the game. Because that's where the bad guy, the usurper, is currently holding out. What is interesting is once I had done all the other stuff on the map, I'd cleared the quests, like I had mentioned, the quests repeat in every region, and they sure do. Once I'd cleared those up and I'd fought the weird optional battles, and all that was left was a progression of essentially the last battle in the capital of the third kingdom that you liberate, the last battle in the game, and a battle in front of your capital that is completely optional. You can bypass it. That is essentially like a guard force that's trying to block one of the bridges to let you cross the path. And which is like completely unnecessary. You don't have to fight that battle at all. I just chose to fight it. Those are 3 incredibly compelling missions. They are structured with unique challenges that present both positions of extreme danger and opportunity for you to engage in particularly effective strategic decisions that not only counter that danger, but can, if you execute correctly, will let you flip the danger on its head. Like, turn the problem against your opponents. To give an example, in what is the last game mission, so not the non-canon thing at the end, there is a couple components. The mission is called Unicorn Overlord, which is the origin of the game's name, and they explain what that dumb name means at the end of the game. But there is when you unlock paths to it through those missions I talked about, the really small territory missions that just aren't very interesting. There's 5 of those that surround the capital. And they're all level 40, which is not the level cap. 50 is the level cap, but 40 is basically as high as enemies go in the game until you get to the post game. What I didn't know until I played it a second time is that as you clear them, I knew this because I cleared all of them beforehand. It opens up another spot on the map that's just the icon for the Unicorn Overlord battle. And it's just okay, whatever. I assumed that and I'd seen that before. There's a few other main big story missions where there's a couple spots on the map that trigger the battle because the battle's huge. And so maybe there's because the battle on the map is taking place in the game world map. So it's as big as the game world is. And so there is a certain amount of okay, well, it didn't occur to me that picking the starting spot, where I chose to approach from and which icon I engaged with, would drive where my forces entered the battle space. But when I replayed it, I entered it from the far west, which is where I clicked it from on the map, versus the south, which is where I came from the first time I played it. And that fundamentally changed the strategy that I employed in that fight. So there is a tactical decision to stuff like that. And there was another mission where you have 2 choices in one side, and I now realize that I could have walked in with my allies versus they were kind of off fucking around doing their own thing because I picked the other starting point for the fight. But in that mission there is a bunch of stuff. There's a bunch of siege weapons that are unmanned that I knew obviously were going to be manned as soon as I approached them. But if I could get to them somehow and steal them before they were occupied, I could use them and just fucking go ham on the enemies. And so where this game offers one of its unique innovations is there's 3 types of skills. There's the active skill, there's the passive skill, and those are for combat. And then there's a third skill, which is, I call them field skills, but that's not what they're called. I can't remember what they're called. But essentially, they're skills you can use on the battlefield, not in a fight. So some of them are you can drop arrows on units on a little, you basically can draw a circle on a map. There's a certain range. If your unit contains an archer. And any enemy unit in that circle will get hit by a bunch of arrows. And if there's a flying unit, they'll take double damage. So there's things you can do to soften up enemies. There's one you can use. It's a big hammer swing that clears out obstacles barricades, which are items, and you can put down barricades too. And there is some strategy to that. Or landmines, which again, you can use those. And in this fight where there's a ton of forward pressure from the enemies or back pressure from the enemies who are just constantly spawning, coming after your starting spot, being able to create a big diversion was a great idea. Well, one of those skills is called Jump and Jump 2. They take 2 or 3 of the stat that you collect for killing enemies. As you kill enemies or cap fame is the stat. Kill enemies or liberate towns, you get some amount of fame. And so 2 or 3 units of it's pretty sizable. But the 3-unit one lets you jump to any enemy in range. So I had a unit that jumped to the enemy that was going to enter the siege machine as soon as I got close, killed them, killed the other 2 that were going to jump into those siege machines, and then just went fucking wild. And I just completely cleared out the middle of that map. And it just obviated what would have been an incredibly complicated puzzle to unlock because there was a million barriers in my way. And I don't know that that was their intended solution to that map because I had to use stealth to get up to it. So I had to go through the woods. I had to have a unit that could do it and could survive being in the middle of that maelstrom and then execute. And it worked. And I felt like a genius. And that's the stuff that in strategy games is like those moments where you feel like a fucking genius. Where it's just like, yeah, I did that. I completely unwound what the game had laid out as a trap for me. And I didn't just do it because I know this map and know where the trap's coming from. I did it because I observed, I applied what I had learned in other scenarios, and I came up with a unique solution to essentially unspring this trap. And there were a bunch of those in those last few missions. And so playing them back to back to back without the cruft between them, like if the game had been like that, it had been, 20 missions in a chain that are like that, it'd feel really good. It'd feel really fucking good because those missions, those last 3 were all really unique. They, on multiple occasions, posited you with a question. Like, how are you going to solve this problem I am showing you? And you really had to sit there and think, okay, what's in my toolbox? The units I have, what can I do? What can I apply here to solve that problem? And maybe the problem is that unit that can solve the problem here is busy solving another problem somewhere else they're uniquely suited. So how do I get them from there to here quickly? And there are a handful of options for that. You can have them march, but there's a timer. You can have them enter one of the strongholds you control and then come out in a different one, kind of like a warp pipe. But maybe there's not a stronghold nearby they can get into. Some units have a skill. I think I only have 2 units that have it. Have a skill that lets them swap positions with anybody else on the map. Well, if you really are galaxy braining it, you can use that to put 2 units where you want them if you swap them with another unit that needs to be where the first one is. Well, that unit that has it is really fast, but there's a unit that's essentially just a big defensive unit that I like to put in places to disrupt the flow of enemies that are being generated. Because they'll get generated, they'll walk down the path, and then they'll just try to make an end run towards your base. Like, there are units that I like to put, one in particular, I like to put in those intersections because enemies just bounce off them. And they just stop the problem of enemies coming from these bases. So I was like, how do I get them there? It's too far away from any of my spawn points. Well, I send the unit that can swap and goes really fast. I send them up there. I swap them with the unit I want, the slow one. The slow one drops the defensive wall that I mentioned and the landmines and everything. And then the unit that can move fast and teleport just goes back into the base, comes out closest to where I need them, and starts walking again. And all of those little things, as you're constantly juggling tasks and you're in these big late game maps where you're watching the battle progress on 3 different fronts and you're challenging different problems. Like the game has actually set up these maps in a really, really elegant way where in one place there's a big fire. So if you have units that are walking, the fire's going to hurt them. How do you get around the fire? How do you solve the fire? Well, some units have the ability to make it fucking rain. That's one way to solve the fire. But what if you don't want to do that? Or what if that unit's busy doing something else, which was the problem I had? Well, can I use the fire to drag the enemies into the fight? Can I put them on the disadvantage? Well, another place I've got this like really narrow path between 2 mountains, and it's just full of enemies that are very hard to move, and there's no place to rest. So like, how do I prepare for that? How do I send units through that aren't going to get to rest, but need to have enough stamina to keep moving? Like, those feel really good. And so, like, all the other stuff the game asks you to do, it's interesting. Like, finding these secrets is interesting, but it's only interesting insofar that they remain novel. And when the game just gives you the same kinds of secrets over and over again, that novelty's lost. So, like, this battle, like, the last story battle is probably, it does some shit at the end that I don't love, but it does posit an interesting challenge. The second to last kingdom you liberate, or the last kingdom you liberate that's not Elaine's, its final fight is an absolute, like, it's a masterpiece. It is as good as any mission in an ogre battle game. It is fundamentally like they understood what the tools that they've given you to play with. They've put opportunities for you to flex using those tools. They've put challenges in your way that if you don't understand how to crack them, you can still force your way through, but you're going to pay for it. And is that going to hurt you downstream in the fight? Like, they really make sure you have everything you want and everything you need. And then they basically say, like, okay, use it. Figure it out. And so, like, this is an incredibly, like, well-made... I'm not doing the, like, game clearly made by professionals, because it's more than that. It does all the stuff that, like, a late Ogre Battle... Like, if they were still making Ogre Battle games, this does all the stuff that I would expect it to do. And it does it really well. But simple things that it messed up, like the ability to quickly upgrade the gear of my team, or the fact that every shop has a unique inventory and there's like 35 shops and they're probably only carrying like 2 healing items. I don't mean like, oh, you can choose from these 2. They might have 9 healing items on the shelf, but they're only going to have like 2 in stock. So you have to go store to store to store to store and just buy out the shop, which is kind of annoying. Some of these characters are really good, but there's 62 of them. And so at the end, when it tells you what everybody did after the war, it takes like 7.5 minutes to do the whole party. It takes so long. It's so long. But there is a certain amount of just like the stuff that they innovated. All of that feels like it has weaknesses. The open world map doesn't contribute as much as it detracts, I think. The quest stuff they put in there doesn't feel very good. The short non-event missions could be used for non-distinct events. Like, hey, this is stuff that's not part of the plot. But they don't. They just stick them in there amongst the trees, and then they just don't. They feel worse by their comparison. Like there is a part of it where they're almost like there's a subset of them, and this is the minority, where they're almost like Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild shrines, where they have one problem in them, like one puzzle to solve, and it might be a fairly complicated solution relative to the average puzzle on a map. But once you solve it, it's over. It's like, it's very bite-sized, and they just don't feel rewarding, because in most cases you can just brute force your way through them anyway. You don't even have to try to solve the problem. So yeah, they just feel like a miss. And so I really like this game. I might even say that I don't know if I'm willing to say I love this game yet. Like it's just one of those games where it's like, ooh, where does it sit? It's extremely good, and like the skill that is shown is masterful. Like, these people understood a game play style that's really only ever been made by one team, like, successfully, and they get it. They understand, and they show all the mastery of those elements that their inspiration did. And I know it's their inspiration because the title screen looks almost identical to the title screen of Ogre Battle 64 once you get past them looking out over the horizon, the one where it's got 2 units of soldiers staring down each other. In fact, they're almost in the same position. It's wild. But their innovations aren't right. They're not there. And they're like, there's ideas they could have done. Like, they're either, they should have canned the idea, or they should have taken the idea one step further. And that's the feeling I constantly have. Also, they make Sakurai quality menus, which, if you've a long-time listeners of the show, is probably one of the meanest things I can say about your menus.
So was it Sakurai's wife that did those menus then?
No, because there's not enough like weird shapes.
Okay.
If all the shapes were like different size circles, then maybe. But no, these are just items on a menu list. It's just, they're just laid out in a way that sucks. It's like, if I need to re-gear 62 people, like, I need to be able to quickly tab through the people and go like, yeah, I'm gonna just flip through them and go, okay, I'm gonna give you a new sword. Like, one of the things that Ogre Battle does that I love is I can just buy stuff from the shop from the menu. The shop is the shop is the shop, no matter where I am. And that really makes it easy when I'm buying new gear for people, because I just open up the shop and go, I want to buy Timothy here a new sword. Oh, here are the swords that are for sale. I bought Timothy a sword. Do you want to equip it? Yeah, I want to equip it. Done. Whereas in this game, I'd have to navigate to a town, buy a sword, figure out who's the best person to receive that sword, because it's not easy to just tab through and go like, you need a new sword. Apply that sword through 3 menus deep. It's 3 menus deep? It's 4 menus deep to change their equipment. And I don't know that I've necessarily put that sword on the right person, because it's like, well, I have to go drill into a specific person to put the sword on him. I found that Elaine, I was upgrading his sword constantly, and there were other people who were using their original sword for like 2/3 of the game. And I'm like, fuck. Let me go give you a new sword, buddy. The fact that I have to build out the party to like not just build out the characters, but build out how big a party I can make. I understand some restriction, but like having to spend 200, of the game's internal currency for every one of my 8 units to make them a fully staffed unit, it sucks. It just meant I had to grind for currency. It's like, yeah, they could have done better here. They could have just made this easy. Or they could have just like said, hey, as the game progresses, Elaine's allowed to have more units and not make you pay for making the units bigger. Because there is something about learning them when they're smaller. Like when a unit's 3 versus a unit's 5. When a unit's 2, like you really have to understand the interplay between the 2 classes and their skills. But the thing is, when you have like 2-person units, you only have like 5 classes. But by the end, I've got like 28 classes. And so I don't know what most of these classes even fucking do. Even now that I've beaten the game and seen all the content and unlocked all the classes. Yeah, go read the class diary, but yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And it didn't necessarily need to be this much. Like I talked about how they must ran out of money, but like, man, you could have probably saved some money. You probably could have spent less money. I'm just saying. And the game might have been better for it, but like I said, I'm very interested I'm always going to be interested in Vanillaware's next project. I would love to see them go back to this, because I think what they showed a mastery in level design that I did not think was going to be possible. Not every story mission is that good, but those last 3 fucking slap. I would say even most of the capital sieges, because every region ends in recapturing a capital. All of them are good. Like, all of them are at least very good. And all of them have a unique twist. And all of them have something interesting happening. I wish every battle was that way. A lot of them have at least something neat. But, God, those capital sieges, they feel intense. They feel challenging. There's usually a lot going on, so you're having to track multiple... Because, remember, the game's moving in real time. You have to track things in your head. You have to have a plan that you're executing. You can't just kind of swing wildly at the fences. But I will say by the end, I had gotten so strong and my units had gotten so refined that there was a certain amount of like bowling ball rolling downhill where like as long as I was applying the right tool, I didn't need to monitor stuff because it was mostly on autocomplete. But yeah, this is a really good game with just like the weird additions that make it worse. And that sucks. That's the worst. Like, that's the worst part about a game when you're like, if you just didn't include this, the game would be better. I know why you put it here, but it fundamentally, like, it contributes some enjoyment to the game, but it also contributes some negativity to the game, and the balance isn't always in the enjoyment's favor. Sometimes it is. And sometimes the same addition, like there are times where that addition is really good and it really makes a difference that it's there. And then there are times where it's fucking miserable that it's there. So the balance isn't consistent, but on the whole, a lot of times these things have balances that feel just slightly negative. It's like, man. So, yeah, that's all I'm going to say about this game, unless they announce more of it. But like, you should still play it. It's still really good. It's still, I mean, this is the first true Ogre Battle style game we've gotten since Ogre Battle 64. Like, well, no, since the Neo Geo Pot Color game, we didn't get that. Even Soul
But I mean,
Nomad.
that was like what, 20 years ago at this point?
Yeah, and we didn't get it.
Yeah.
Even Soul Nomad is further afield from those games than this is. Like, I went back and touched Soul Nomad the other day, and like, yeah, the ideas are there, but it's different. It's significantly more different than I remembered. Because they were obviously trying to be different. This is very much the same, except for its world structure. And it just, maybe that wasn't the right call. I don't know. I will also say that the voice acting is by and large, very good. And some of the writing is very funny. Mostly by design, sometimes not. But I don't care either way. So yeah, I still encourage people to play it because I think it's excellent. It's just boy, you guys missed. You guys missed in that it's that frustrating like, God, you're so close. So yeah, that's it. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm done. I'm done talking about Unicorn Overlord until like Game of the Year conversations later. Because right now, looking at the lineup, it's still got a pretty good chance of making my top 5. So, Guillaume.
Yeah.
What are you up to?
Yeah, so I went to a friend's place over the weekend, and the guy's got a PlayStation 5, and so I came back with his PlayStation 4 lent to me indefinitely, so that's pretty
nice.
Sweet. But I guess before talking about that, I can talk about Heave, which is the game that we've played while we're over there. After a few games of FIFA and NHL 94 and 2024, I guess, which was a requirement, I guess. You know, I was over there. I had to be polite. I had to try to play the hockey games and the football game, but I'm not going to talk about those. Heave Ho, though, is a game I've talked about already, but like if you haven't, and it's not new, it's on the Switch since 2019, but it is a lot of fun. Most people, I don't know, like it's a Devolver Digital, release, so I'm sure it's pretty well known already, and I'm sure that if people are familiar with it, it's probably from watching streamers or something. But it is a fun time if you can manage to get like 3-4 people to play it. Like literally our group could not, like I wanted to quit and like the others were like, one more stage. It's a game where basically you control these, they're literally just heads with 2 arms sticking out. And you control the arms with the left stick, and you can hold down the L or R buttons to grab with your hand. And you release and the buttons, so you release the grabbing. It's all about, kind of swinging from platforms, trying to make it to, like single screen stages, make it to the from where you begin to the to the goal. And sometimes you'll have to collaborate when you're playing multiplayer. You'll have to grab each other's hands or faces or whatever it is that you can grab. But ultimately, like you try to get everyone to either hold on to you as you swing. You try to coordinate everyone so that someone doesn't release the wrong button and end up killing everyone by dropping everyone into the void. It's a lot of fun. It's hard to describe, and unfortunately, like after we played a lot of the co-op levels, I looked up a trailer, and it looks like I missed out on a lot of actually fun-looking competitive modes.
Yes.
So I guess next time I can make this happen, I'll try those. But normally, Karen and I, we just kind of gravitate towards the co-op modes. So, yeah, we'll see. It's kind of a missed opportunity there. But there's some fun-looking stuff in this game. So there's a ton of content. Like we played for several hours. I have no idea if we even made much of a dent into the number of levels that are available in this co-op mode. And it just kept coming up with new hazards and fun little twists. Towards the end, we had platforms that were just like, they didn't look like they would swivel, but they swiveled when you grabbed them. And so that was a neat wrinkle that just led to even more kind of nerve-wracking, will the physics do the right thing here? Will the physics here do the thing that I want them to do? So ton of fun. But yeah, so I came back with a PlayStation 4. I never had I never owned the PlayStation 4. I haven't really played anything on it before. So I've now got access to a few of Sony's biggest and most popular games from good lord, is it 10 years ago? I didn't look this up.
Getting close, if not.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's pretty crazy, and I it's not like I was completely uninterested in Sony games. It's just that I was so busy with the Wii U that I guess I did not see the years pass, and then
fair.
by that point, it was just kind of too late to get one. And then, I don't know.
Zombie U was just too engrossing for you.
Whenever I pick up the Wii U gamepad, all I can think about is putting down the Wii U gamepad. Who knows how long it took between
your arms get tired after
It's
holding
true.
it for about 3 seconds.
I actually quite like, we're joking here, but I love the Wii U.
We hosted a podcast for 6 years during the Wii U era.
Yeah.
Like,
But it's
Yeah.
got the proof that the Wii U had, at least, even if it was not the best platform, the best console, it had some very good games. It's that these games just keep being ported on the Switch, and they're very good still. So that's something that I'm not sure I would say about the first Insomniac Spider-Man game. Or at least I would say it's all right, but it's not the great game that I thought I was going to be playing. And because when it came out initially, people were just going crazy over it. Finally, a good Spider-Man game. Except that I feel like people had said that about Spider-Man 2 on the PlayStation 2 already. Finally a good Spider-Man game. And so I'm a little bit underwhelmed about Insomniac's Spider-Man. And I thought I was going to have a big, another one of those, Guillaume is having an existential crisis over not liking a game as much as he expected to. But then, I posted on the NWR Discord, and Neil, who, if there's someone I trust about Marvel opinions and Spider-Man opinions, it's Neil. He was like, you're all right. Spider-Man, the first game was just all right, and the sequels, Miles Morales and Spider-Man 2, improve tremendously on what the first one did. So that was a relief. I'm not crazy. I'm not out of touch. The kids were wrong. All is well. But I am enjoying it enough. But it's weird because I've only seen on the Discord validation, basically. We've also got Mars Mage, who said that he played through the game, but it was more kind of a fast food kind of thing, not really getting much nutrition out of it, but it was a pleasant enough thing to be doing when one wants to be just wasting time and play a video game for a few minutes. That's what this game is. I'm kind of not shocked, it's too much, but it is surprising just how little newness there is in this game, innovation, or whatever you want to call it. Literally, one of the best things about it is the way that you move in the game. Of course, you're swinging around. That is awesome. But that I feel like video game developers had gotten that down on the PlayStation 2 already. So it's not really that big of a deal.
But it had been a while.
It had been a while, yeah. But yeah, so yeah, it's good in that way. But then the combat is literally, I had heard of the comparisons with Batman Arkham Asylum. I was not prepared. They just flat out, they didn't even mind that everyone saw them copying, what's their name? Rocksteady.
Rocksteady,
They openly copied Rocksteady's homework, and it's literally the same thing. It's the same probably the same buttons even. Like, I don't know, but like, I feel like, wow, I've played this exact same kind of battle system before. It works well. Like, I can understand why they copied it, but it's, again, like, there's not that feeling of like, ooh, like, this is new, this is cool. There was no friction. Like, I didn't have to, like, let me wrap my head around it a little bit, like, learn it. It was all very, kind of instantaneous because, I had played this before. And yeah, like, so what's left here is like the story seems to be well told, well presented. Like, it's obviously a high budget game. But I'm not super, I don't think, like, this is yet another version of Spider-Man. And I don't know how many versions of Spider-Man I need, Like, I feel like already, Andrew Garfield was too much, and then we got Tom Holland, and I really, like, I didn't care for that either, like, that weird, Iron Man is my dad kind of thing. And then, yeah, I don't know, like, so this is yet again another, like, the same kind of story being told. I'm not super into it yet. I'm hoping that it's going to grow on me, but Peter Parker in this game looks a little bit weird, I'll be honest, to me. And anyway, we'll see. I guess I don't have like any kind of bright what do you call it? Not epiphanies, but like, I don't think I'm going to teach anyone anything about this game.
Revelations.
But that
Revelations,
in and of itself is a statement about the game. It's just like, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if I wanted to be mean, I could say, like, this is a competent game made by professionals.
Do it.
But you're not saying that, to be clear. You're not saying that. Even though
I
you
want
just
to.
did.
Yeah.
I do have to say just a bit earlier. I mean, I like the way that the Wii U was positioned as the villain in you not having a PS4 when it only overlapped with the PS4 for about 3 years. And
True.
I would assume the real
That's
villain,
charitable.
the real villain in this plot is in fact the Microsoft rewards matrix that you so candidly owned up to being a miserable puppet of last week was somehow just nudged to the side. Let's not acknowledge that again.
My favorite part about that was that in the Discord, somebody was commenting on the like, wow, Guillaume's talking about this. This is really weird. And then later going like, oh no, it's me. It's like, good. We have two sufferers in here. Perfect.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. Like, at the time that I bought the Xbox, it seemed like a good idea. But then, and with Game Pass, like, I thought I was making good, savvy purchase decisions. It was but turns out I was Zoidberg, and I didn't know what I was doing. I probably should have gone with the PlayStation 5. Yeah, I don't know. Like, ultimately, like, that's the thing. Like, part of my disappointment probably comes from the fact that I have been waiting so long to play this game, and then it turns out that it's like, it's not rocking my world, but then it's not like I have this expectation for every game that I play, or, it's not reasonable to expect that of every game, but I'm just a little bit surprised by just how okay it is.
I do wonder, with the point about the combat and, the Rocksteady Batman games, would that have been more jarring or more kind of like to its detriment had you played it when it was released or now, because they were more current then, weren't they? The Batman, kind of games. So, they would have seen more of a kind of, I just did this rather than I did this, 10 years ago or whatever.
Right. What might have, I don't know about that, like maybe, yeah, like it would have been even more jarring because it would all have been more fresh in my memory. But, what would have been different perhaps is, had, Breath of the Wild been released yet? Because I feel like Breath of the Wild kind of changed my perception.
I thought maybe they were like close time wise.
Right. So I kind of feel like Breath of the Wild ruined open world games for me in that in this kind of made in this mold. The kind of the Ubisoft check out the map and go to the icons that you see. Because this is very much that type of open world. Now, I'm not suggesting that that Insomniac could have crafted a almost faithful New York City where we made this so that from this point you can see over there and you can it makes you want to go there and then you find something. That's not really how city high rises and buildings work, I guess. But it is very much it's giving me stuff that is not all that interesting to do. I'm having to stop a lot of muggings and car chases and stuff, and it does seem like Spider-Man's life is, pretty filled with these events, but it feels like I don't think that there's that many robberies and muggings that happen in a day, even in New York City. I don't know.
No,
So yeah, the city kind of feels off. I kind of wish that Spider-Man was in a fictional city because that would be oh yeah, Spider-Man's Gotham City. That sounds, yeah, of course. That there's a bank being robbed every 2 minutes.
Yeah, right. Because it's all fictional anyways.
Well, that's part of the difference between Marvel and DC is that DC are cowards and wouldn't call Baltimore. I can't remember what they called Baltimore in DC Comics, but
Starling City or no.
Yeah, it's got some stupid name. But Marvel's nah, man, it's fucking DC. Let's go.
Right. So there's the random kind of, okay, crime is happening here, or an accident is happening here, so go over there, Spider-Man. But there's also a lot of apparently Peter Parker has 60 backpacks that he's bought. Apparently he's very poor, he can't pay his rent, but he had the money at some point to buy just fucking 60 backpacks and just filled them with this is one area where Insomniac copied Rocksteady's homework, but didn't really get it because they're just we're just gonna have Spider-Man has stashed these backpacks all over New York City, but a lot of them are just at ground level where people could easily find it and grab it and leave with it. So what was the point? Also, these backpacks contain the iron knuckles that the Kingpin beat him up with at some point, or his master's thesis signed Peter Parker. He's got that in the backpack somewhere in a high rise, just for reasons.
How old were the people that wrote this game that they're turning over the only copy on paper of the fucking doctoral thesis?
I've never seen this movie, but isn't there some sort of the Connery movie, Finding Forrester? Isn't this based on this premise of someone finds the one copy of the thesis or something? It's really vague memories.
I finished college. I finished high school almost 20 years ago, and I didn't turn in a paper physically since before I finished high school. Who the fuck is turning in physical papers? Let alone did he make it on a Selectric typewriter? He could just go print another fucking copy. This fucking doctoral thesis. Oh, it's so dumb. How old was this writer? Too old is the answer. Too fucking old.
I don't know. I feel it's weird. It's as if they were well, this is an open world game. We gotta have collectibles, but then didn't know what to do with it. Yeah,
they should have made you find one. Oh, go ahead.
These are not super interesting world building collectibles, or I don't know. Maybe super Spider-Man fans just are geeking out over these items, but I don't.
It's Peter's thesis.
Yeah, I don't know. It was important in issue 32 of the Earth 2020. I don't know.
Earth 719. Yeah, Peter lost his thesis and never got bit by the spider.
Right.
No, I think what they should have done, because if they're doing the whole like collectathon thing that open world games is, you should have had to find one page of the thesis at a time, spread throughout the entirety of the 5 boroughs.
That's the only way you do it. The grocery list.
Yeah, that would have been good. Actually, I would have taken that. That would have been stupid, but
what if there was a menu option as you tabbed through it, like you could actually read it, like they actually had somebody write a fucking thesis. And like as you found it, the pages popped in, so you could just pan through and go like, I'm missing the next 20 pages, and here we go, page 28. And I've got this one. Like, come on, Sony, you spent 200. I think they spent 200 million on this one and like 400 on the next. Some insane numbers. Pay someone to write a thesis so you can make it a collectible in the game, and then let people read it. It's
no. You see now I understand. I know. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. Like in Spider-Man 3, we're going to collect page after page of the thesis, and then we get to the illustrations, and we get to the rat with the giant penis.
Look, if you're telling me I can buy a Spider-Man game character, I actually don't really like Spider-Man that much. I thought he's kind of sucked. And on page 798 of Peter Parker's fucking thesis, his big dick thesis, is the big dick rat. I'm in. I'm fucking it. I'll pay the $70 for this game. I'll get the premium edition where it's the double big dick thesis. It's 1,400 pages and there are 2 rats. Let's fucking go. This is putting value in your content.
Just in case someone is not really keeping up with the news, or is not terminally online, or is listening to this in the future where this incident has been forgotten, just Google, if you're not easily upset, just Google AI rat giant penis. You're going to find it. You're going to find the story. Just
Google rat giant penis. This is a potential new episode title that will actually
trust us. You'll be great.
Again, I mean, as if you wouldn't be binging it.
Right. Just make sure you use Bing.
So after, let's talk about this.
All right, let's talk about this. Yes, let's talk about anything on this topic. On Bing.
After I talked about my binging ways and my Microsoft reward points, Microsoft went ahead and changed the way that you get points again.
They did between episodes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody was bitching about the stupid Bejeweled clone not giving points anymore.
Right.
Oh, man, that's how I was getting them for a while.
I finally deleted that app because, it was a very good, high-paying in reward points.
You know what I find high-paying? My job.
Yeah, I know. But, it was like a good source of points, and now less so. Much less so. 10 times less so. So I finally deleted that app. But I am still kind of occasionally. But less than before.
What if Peter Parker had to look up where the crimes were on Bing Maps and then get there? But he
Don't we already know that Peter Parker is a binger? I feel like that was in the movie.
I'm not touching this. If you're telling me did Microsoft pay to have Peter Parker use Bing, I would believe that in a heartbeat. That seems like the kind of thing where Sony's like, look.
In 2012's The Amazing Spider-Man, Peter Parker uses Bing to discover why he's slowly morphing into a human spider.
What would you search for there?
This rightfully earned them the ridicule of the internet at the time.
What, what was Ask Jeeves not willing to pony up? Come on. What, if you're gonna, what would you, all right, Guillaume, you're the Bing expert. Mm-hmm. You found that suddenly you have this uncontrollable urge to climb up walls, and it's very easy to do. And when there's danger, you just feel this weird tingling sensation. What are you going to put into Bing to try to figure out your WebMD diagnosis?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm guessing if I were using WebMD, I'm guessing I would learn that I have cancer no matter what. But
I mean, Peter did get bitten by a radioactive spider. He probably will eventually.
Right. Anyway, so we've Yeah, we kind of. I think we've answered the question. What was the question? There was no question. No.
The question was about what would happen if you got bit by a radioactive rat with a giant penis. And the answer is you'd start using Bing.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
but I wouldn't be able to spell anything because AI image generation will just make up shit.
It's great. I don't see the problem here. What if everybody's Peter Parker thesis is AI generated on the fly? So like everybody's thesis is different. Again, this is content to put in your game. This is free. Sony, this one's free. I'm offering you the opportunity to have giant phallic animals randomly show up in people's games.
Oh, what a way to bookend this.
It's great. It's great.
Yeah, this first segment.
It's great. This is 2 weeks in a row we've ended with discussion of big dicks. So let's move on. Well, to be fair, last time it was an adjective. This time it is an actual noun. So let's move on. We're going to take a break here. Guillaume, are you going to drop?
Yeah.
All right. So Guillaume's going to step away after this one, but when we come back, the remaining crew is going to do a couple email, and then we're going to call it a show because we've done enough damage already. So stay tuned.
Bye.
We return with listener mail, and I'm not even going to tell you how much time's passed between segments. It is a surprising amount of time. But Guillaume has left us. We're
he's still alive. He's still alive.
Yeah, no, I didn't say he's left the world. He's just left this call.
Yeah.
So we are here to do some listener mail. John, quiz time. If I have a question,
a query, if you will,
about life. Where should I send it?
Well, I mean, there's probably several therapists that would help you, probably several support lines, but you can also send an email to rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. That is rfn@nintendoworldreport.com.
Oh, okay. So my original plan had been to call 188 the Gambler and ask them about Nintendo's upcoming release calendar.
Like I said, there are many support lines.
Does that get you directly through to Kenny Rogers?
I like that like when they, in these fucking gambling ads, they're by law required to read out, like, if you have a gambling problem, call. And like every state has their own phone number, so it's just this barrage of 800 and 888 and 877 toll-free numbers. But then one of them is just like, call 1-888-GAMBLER. And I'm like, no, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Don't make me call it. Call 1-888-NOT-GAMBLER. 1-888-SENSIBLE ECONOMIC PLAN. So yeah, there are many helplines to help us, but none of them offer what we do, which is cogent insight onto Nintendo's internal thinking. By that I mean fucking bullshit. So we're gonna go ahead and read the first email. And John, I'd like you to read it for me. This isn't a setup because I don't remember which one's first and which one's second.
The Spam Owl writes,
"Yeah,
dear RFN dudes. With the recent reports and rumors suggesting that the successor to the Switch will now launch in Q1 of 2025, what do you think Nintendo has up its sleeve for the last half of this year? With cash reserves of $11 billion and no debt, making them the richest company in Japan, it seems that they have no need to launch new hardware this year. Therefore, it is intriguing to think what games they will bring out for the end of this year, particularly for Black Friday and Christmas. An obvious answer is the 2 HD Zeldas, which are long overdue. Apart from that, I'm struggling to think of what else they could bring out. Could it be that Metroid 4 and/or a new 3D Mario will be the big holiday games, and that they also launch on the Switch's successor? Anyway, I would be very interested in your opinions and views on this matter, as, like the man with a mouth full of maggots, my breath is baited. Keep up your fine work. I guess that's a fishing analogy, James. Keep up your fine work on the best Nintendo podcast out there by far. TTFN, which stands for Ta-Ta for now, which is what Greg learned today.
the only Nintendo podcast out there. Please ignore the fact that Nintendo World Report hosts like 4 others.
The only other person I can think of offhand that signs off using Tatar is Hannibal Lecter in the film Hannibal. So,
well, I mean, going with the mouthful of, yeah,
it sounds like some sort of overwrought murder scenario in Harris, but
I'm feeling less comfortable in this email. But that's okay. So, to summarize, away from horrificness, what? So I want to put a wording here. I want to. And I say this periodically, but I just want to say it again. Switch's successor, whatever it's called. I don't like using the term Switch 2 because we don't know that it's going to be Switch-like device. Like, people say that. People say a lot of shit. Doesn't make it true. Has never been delayed. John, why has it ever been delayed?
Because a release date was never announced.
Well, more than that.
The existence of anything hasn't been announced.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Like, officially, it doesn't exist.
It's getting perilously close to Siren territory. It is it's a slightly different purpose than it was back in the NX days, but it's similar in that, it's like, because that's the point, isn't it? Is back then when we were, waiting out for the other, again, Wii U did not last 6 years. It lasted 4 and a bit years.
Right.
But, there was a lot of that, a percentage of that was just waiting for the next thing because it was very clear that, it hadn't succeeded. And for a fair amount, that's what, you did have a code. You had NX, you had something, you didn't have details, but then therefore the, disclaimer about, well, we don't know what it is yet. But you at least had that. We haven't even got to that stage yet because the Switch has been a roaring success, very much unlike Wii U.
So they no longer have to convince their fan base not to abandon them.
Yeah,
right. There's no it that we don't know what it is. So like I'm always really cautious about comments and questions and thoughts that treat the idea that the Switch was delayed out of this year's
the calendar year,
right, in this calendar year, that treat that as if it is like canonical information.
Well, that happened. You know what I mean? It's just like, well, no, we don't. There's no telling what happened there. If anything, I guess
we have comments from people who profess to know things, but what they professed to know was that it was coming out this year, and it isn't. So they were wrong. And like you could say, and of course their answer is, oh, well, plans change. Which, yeah, that's true. But also maybe you were just wrong. Maybe you were just fucking wrong, bro. And so like, you have to hold that L. So like there's a certain amount of like, yeah, maybe the plan did change. But then your sources weren't very good because there's no way Nintendo didn't at least contemplate, if their plan was to release it this year, there's no way they didn't at least contemplate the possibility that it wasn't going to release this year because if they did make that call, which apparently was allegedly made back in like February, they had 10 months to get that fucking thing out. At 10 fucking months and still be in the calendar year. And they said, nah, it ain't happening. So like, it's not even fucking close if that's the case. Like it is a significant miss. So it just feels like, or we have to be careful with that. Like we can't treat that as if it is a stone cold fact. Now, does that change fundamentally this question? Maybe only a little bit. Maybe only on the margins. So, like, fundamentally the question is like, hey, it really comes down to what we have every so often where there's not like an obvious big title sitting out there, except for Metroid Prime 4, which may or may not exist.
And that's been sitting out there for so long, it's almost faded into the wallpaper, and we don't know, as you say, we don't know what sort of position it's in. We don't know if it could be moved to future hardware. It could be a cross-platform title, or it could still be, as somewhat suggested by the Spam Mail's email, that maybe that could be just the Switch's game this year by itself, and not necessarily make an appearance straight away on the next hardware. Right. It's just all the possibilities are out there with that, because it's obviously they made, as we've said many times, the error of oversharing about, oh, well, let's announce the game when there was no substance behind that announcement. You know what I mean? It was, I mean, this is something they've been guilty of before, I guess. Like the,
oh yeah, definitely.
The Smash Brothers Brawl thing, basically, wasn't it? I think 2005, where they just said, oh yeah, we're making another Smash Brothers game. But like Sakurai was at E3, go like, are you? Because I would have expected you'd speak to me about that,
and it's going to be online. That was the other part. And he's like, really?
A lot of the time, they, are quite careful. Probably more careful than most, and yet they still are careless. Or have been from time to time. And Metro Prime 4 was one of those times. I think at a certain point, though, after they gave that last update, was that in 2019 or something? I forget, a long time ago now. They probably decided it's better to say very little to nothing until you actually had your something ready to show, that wasn't going to go wrong, that wasn't going to go up in smoke somehow. So we still wait for that day to come, but it's, I guess that's certainly, one of the last dominoes, that's out there to fall regarding Switch over all this time. And then there's things, as it was mentioned, obviously Wind Waker and Twilight Princess that both got HD conversions, ports, remakes, whatever, on Wii U, that could come over, a little bit of a surprise, I suppose, that one or both of those hasn't in all these years. So that's, another thing that's sensible enough, I suppose.
The Wii U one's interesting because they did do a lot of work to try to integrate the gamepad into it.
Yes, I mean the Wii U Wind Waker was very much kind of it felt like it was both. What they were hoping is like, oh, Wind Waker could be on a platform that's popular.
Right. Oh no!
It's about half as popular as GameCube, or 2/3 maybe.
But they really put the effort in that game.
But they did, because also I think it was meant to be a bit of a stepping stone to like, what are we going to do with Zelda on this hardware after this? And of course, it wasn't exactly that, because even though Breath of the Wild did emerge on Wii U, it did so with the the gamepad functionality ripped out of it, because it was going to be a Switch game as well.
Even though Link has a fucking gamepad.
No, I know.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's so obvious how nice it would have been for dealing with all the inventory management, all the innumerable bits of stuff that you pick up and all that. It's so obvious, what was there, and yet, they felt they had to rip it out for parity's sake when the Switch version was obviously going to be the priority.
Yeah, and look, I'm gonna be honest. Like, it really, Twilight Princess really is a product of its era. I found that when we did the replay for the retroactive, and that was a while ago.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
that like a lot of its charms. Like, it's got some good puzzles, but like its design charms, I felt like, are really lacking. There's a couple of spots that look really good. We talked about it, like the Temple of Time, when you actually walk into it and it transforms. Like, that's a really cool moment.
There's some good moments. There's, I mean, like you said, I mean, even probably more so now than it was when we did that retroactive. Like, you probably feel like the datedness of it, the sort of very, like, we have seen
Here's the light.
We have seen Jackson's Lord of the Rings movies at this point.
Exactly.
Even though
blades will bleed.
Even though Wind Waker was like in the middle of those movies, but it hadn't affected Zelda yet in that way. Whereas, like, we get to fight the Balrog in like the second dungeon, the Goron dungeon, and all sorts of very obvious kind of references and things, which that was kind of a very Nintendo thing to do. I can remember essentially playing Independence Day during Star Fox 64. That was a thing that happened. But yeah, I know what you mean. I wonder to like today's Switch playing audience, like what they might make of it exactly, because
it's extremely muted too.
Oh yeah,
visually.
No, because the problem is obviously like Wind Waker exists, so then it's almost like first of all there was a certain amount of backlash to Wind Waker, so you could look at it as overcorrecting for that. But also, I think there's just a certain amount of differentiation as well. Like, just like, well, no, Wind Waker exists. Like, we want it to look different, just not so much just because, some people didn't like Wind Waker, but also because it needs to look like a different product. Like, if that didn't sell, then maybe this will look in a different way, like, or whatever. So, yeah, it's, whereas Wind Waker was so kind of bold, and bright, like, it's very much that kind of,
it looks so good on the OLED. It looks so nice.
Yeah, no, it would. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, Wind Waker, I think would definitely benefit from that, because again, as you said, or hinted at already, whereas their version, the internally developed Wind Waker HD, was, really quite thoughtfully put together. They weren't redesigning the game from scratch or anything. So there was some limitations of the original game.
But a lot of stuff was done.
But they did address things that at least ease some of the, irksome parts of the original, and just things that made it a lot easier, more convenient, your quality of life stuff. Lots of nice stuff. Twilight Princess was much more just like, it was a pretty, creditable job that was done on it, but it was externally handled.
Tantalus?
I forget who it was now. I think they might be Australian. I can't.
I think it was Tantalus. Yeah,
and they did a pretty solid job, but it is very much more just kind of a port. So again, maybe in that sense it might come across as if you just did a port of that port, then maybe that comes across as more dated than even Wind Waker would do. But these are the sorts of options you're presented with, if, as we kind of expect, which again we shouldn't presume too much based on just what we expect, that it is the case that yes, the prime development assets have been moved on to games for a hardware successor, and in the meantime we've got to come up with things that, because again, especially compared to, I mean, even with Wii U, even with something that was as moribund as that, there's still, and I mean, it was sort of risible, but they still bothered to like put Ultra Smash out as just like, oh, let's have something with Mario's name out for that holiday that people can buy. Now, you juxtapose that with now, this forthcoming holiday, if there is no successor console ready to go, the user base is vastly bigger, right? I mean, it's just huge. Right. It's one of the biggest there has ever been in hardware, console history. We were only talking about PS2 and then Game Boy, DS, I should say. That it passed Game Boy recently. That have had more, devices in people's houses over the years. So you've got an enormous amount of money, even if, a lot of people are perfectly aware that, it's likely, or it's even been explicitly confirmed at that point, that there's more hardware coming in the following year. With how robust software sales seem to remain, that is, that's money just waiting to be made. So, you're not just, whether it ends up being remakes, ports, of things that maybe have been remade and ported before, or whatever it is. Like, you got to have something, because you're just leaving money on the table if you don't.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like, maybe they feel like they don't necessarily need to put a bunch out because they have these evergreens that just keep fucking selling.
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
We're not in the God, Mario Kart sold another 4 million copies this quarter, what the shit era anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed this before, but it's probably going to be something where they can get some of their B teams on them.
Yeah,
that's exactly it. They know that there's money to be made, like Greg said, but they also their prime development resources are going to be on the console that does not exist,
and that's where the question about a new 3D Mario game that would debut this in this calendar year, before it would possibly arrive as well, or on the next platform, or maybe not at all. I don't see that. I think
I don't see that happening either.
A new 3D Mario game, that's prime developer assets,
and that
definitely would be held over as a potential killer app for the next console. I think that's beyond the scope of what we're talking about, as John just mentioned, the however you want to put it, B tier, something
and
like.
We just
in that
got
area.
a Mario game last holiday season.
Yeah,
too.
and that felt like that was probably it for that sort of thing, for something of that level of Zelda just a few months before, then that, as we've said before, especially without the DLC, that you would normally expect for games of that kind of magnitude. It really felt like, yes, that is in for the absolute top tier development, kind of, how divisions, or, I know it's all kind of amalgamated now within Nintendo, but for the top tier developers inside Nintendo, that's basically their farewell to the Switch, one would think, and nothing that's followed since would contradict that. We think of the things we've got, like Mario vs. DK from NST, a remake. You think of Princess Peach Showtime by Good Feel, who
right.
also kind of helped fill out the relative back end of Wii U with Woolly World and of 3DS with the Woolly World port. Another
code just came out.
Yeah,
which is like really scraping in.
That's a good deep cut Endless Ocean that's coming is a pretty similar sort of thing. So yeah, everything we're seeing kind of just point, no, 3D Mario, that's too big. Prime 4, as we've said many times, is just one of these things I think that could happen because you've promised it for this hardware for so long, that even if in a way you wouldn't be necessarily sort of thinking to keep it on Switch, you might feel like you're kind of obliged to. And the other thing is, Metroid is not 3D Mario, like not even close commercially, even though, sometimes 3D Mario has sometimes struggled to get up to the level of the side-scrolling games, but Odyssey kind of seemed to crack it. That sold extremely well, didn't it? Obviously, a lot of it is just riding the crest of the wave that Switch itself was so popular, and it launched within the first calendar year of that, so it's had the whole time, whatever it's going to end up being, 8 years to sell, hasn't it? But, it also has a lot of other Mario games to kind of come along and peel off some of its sales, so it's still done really well to rack up the tens of millions that it has. I can't remember exactly where it stands now, but it's a lot compared to the days where it's like, oh, well, Galaxy sold well, but, it was only like 5 million or something, not nearly as much as New Super Mario Brothers, so we need a DVD with Galaxy 2 to tell people how 3D platformers work. That feels like a long time ago. Mostly because it was, but also because that's just a very strange thing.
And look, I've talked about this before. I don't know. There will be a successor to Switch. I don't know what that successor is. I don't know when that successor is. I don't know why that successor is. And you might see why is to make more money. But no, they're Nintendo systems, broadly speaking, have, raison d'etre that you can point to. They do try to have a reason for why is this console a thing versus just continuing on the old one. It very rarely is it more power. Now, more power is a factor, but really the power gulf between Switch and Wii U is pretty small. The raison d'etre for that one is it's actually a fully fucking portable system. Mm-hmm. And so okay, so what's the obvious. And that's the other part. It's something that needs to be visually obvious to the average consumer. So, what mechanism do they possess? What system are they looking to build? What ideas are they looking to explore that make that system obvious? Or maybe they adopt a completely different philosophy this time. I don't know. But, we can't rule out the prospect that the successor system is capable of playing the current system software, at which point, or maybe even playing it with enhancements. So, maybe Metroid Prime 4 would come out, but they'd be like, but on the next system, it will be, it'll run in 1080p. It's 1080p 60. Or whatever. Maybe they've announced the next system, but Metroid Prime 4 is coming out now. Hey, you can play it right now, and then when the new system comes out, you'll be able to play it more in 1080p 60. Something to just tell people, because they did this with the Game Boy. The Game Boy, new Game Boy iterations would come out. And they'd be like, but if you have it in a Game Boy Color, it'll be in color. Or, if you play it on a Game Boy Advance, you'll unlock this extra content.
There was a little bit with the Oracle games, wasn't there? There was something that it was very minor, but it was something you got from on GBA.
Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening DX had a dungeon you could only play on the Game Boy Color. And then the GBA ones, it unlocked an extra area, I think, that you could go to.
There's something in the shop or something. I forget. There's something quite minor, but I didn't play it until years later.
So I didn't have a GBA because it came out around the same time as the GBA. I didn't get a GBA. My sister did for some reason, even though she didn't play video games. But that was a Christmas gift she got. I don't understand it. So I stole her GBA just to get the things in question and then gave it back to her. Yeah, it was very minor because I did it in under 10 minutes. It was just like bang, bang, done. But like it like that is a prospect of something they could do. They could say like, yeah, this thing will work on the successor system, and it's got some other functionality. We just don't know.
And I mean, with something like Metroid Prime 4, maybe it's more something to be willing to experiment with in that way, because again, it's not like a commercial juggernaut. You're not going to be kind of really throwing the baby out with the bathwater on that one. If somehow, like you're whatever like strings you're kind of trying to pull or test there with regard to how does the audience respond to the notion of it, when it's coming out now for this platform, but maybe consider playing it on this other one when that comes out. Like it's it's awkward, isn't it? But, maybe you're willing to try it with something like Metroid Prime 4, which has been awkward from the start. Like, you can't, I mean, but you're not really hurting it the same way you would be with something else.
Yeah, you can almost argue it both ways with Metroid Prime 4, right? Is it better to, knowing that it's not the commercial juggernaut, is it better to release it when people are kind of craving new software at the end of the Switch's life, or when people are craving new software at the beginning of the next system's life?
Well, but the question is also like, I'm gonna play armchair accountant here, which is always precarious. This game's been in development so fucking long, and they've had to change development studios and development projects at least once. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't know how many iterations of this thing existed. Like, it's entirely possible that when Nintendo in-housed it, it's had 3 or 4 restarts since then. It's been a long fucking time.
Yeah.
Like, it's entirely possible this thing's had... We made a joke about it. We're doing predictions that the Metroid Prime 4 is the 4th version of this game. It's the one that's going to come out.
Yeah,
I mean... there was going to be an anthology release of the 3 other versions.
And I mean, at some point during the development of it, they Retro released Metroid Prime Remastered. So, at some point... a team was peeled off within Retro Studios
to do something else.
So who knows what impact that had? That may have just been, we need this studio to produce something.
Right. But like I struggle, given Metroid's relatively limited audience, to foresee a path for this game to be profitable in and of itself.
Yeah.
So like I could see an argument for, if you can, and if the hardware supports it, cross-platforming might have real value for them, because like we can sell it right now. We want this game to sell right now. We don't want it to sell when retailers are trying to dump their copies that haven't sold. We don't want there to be a narrative of a Nintendo first-party game that doesn't fucking sell. Like, we want it to sell right goddamn now. So, saying like, yeah, you can play it on Switch today. You can play it on Switch fucking today. But then in a couple months, when we release the successor system, you can, your game and your save will carry over, but the experience will improve. So you have this like built-in launch software for the next system that has exclusiveness to its experience, but you also have something to support, something that you can sell to the broadest possible market, which is the Switch base, not the successor's base. Because inherently, if you say successor system only, you're cutting off, 90+% of the people who could play the game right now.
Yeah, and again, with something like a Prime 4, that's like, again, maybe more, in some ways, it's more palatable to do that, because the thing is, like, it doesn't appeal to the broad cross section of the 100+ million people that own Switches anyway. It is more concentrated in the kinds of enthusiasts that might buy something early, an early Nintendo loyalist, early adopter type of people. So in that sense, maybe it's an apt thing to actually hold off to be like exclusive for the the Switch successor. But on the other hand, that's kind of breaking the promise of of the way that you've built this as something that will one day come to Switch on the schedule that they share with investors every quarter for all these years and all that. So it again, it's all awkward. There's no kind of non-awkward way out of it in that sense. I mean, one possibility would be if Metroid Prime 4 is not going to be on Switch, if it were just this year, whether it's cross-platform or it's exclusive to a successor, whatever it is, it's just in 25. We've talked before about, another modest thing would be, Prime 2 and 3 bundled together like Pikmin 1 and 2 in a more modest, like HD up-res type of form than the more substantial Prime Remastered, which, where they actually redid the art assets and the lighting and so many things to make it look very nice. Like that again might be beyond the scope of things that are, trying to just fill out this, especially, the second half of this year. But we'll see.
I mean, we talk about to get to the question again of what do they have? We haven't had a Zelda Warriors game since 2020. We're probably about due for one of those. And Breath of the Wild. I mean, Tears of the Kingdom's been out for a year, or we'll have been out. It'll have been out for over a year at that point.
Yep.
It would not be shocking at all if they announced that we're producing another Hyrule Warriors, this one based on Tears of the Kingdom. I totally believe that. That totally seems like something they might do.
It's either Zelda spin-offs or ports, past games, like some kind of Zelda product seems pretty likely in a way, but there wouldn't be overstretching any of Nintendo's Prime developer assets. So
no, that'd be Tecmo Koei. It's outside and doesn't involve them at all. I mean, obviously, Punch Out Warriors has any day now. So
that's what you hold over for the next platform.
Yeah, that you really.
I think there's something obvious we're missing here, and that's the remake of Disaster Day of Crisis.
Disaster Day of Crisis, yeah.
Everything is lining up here.
I could hear the glee in your voice and knew where this was going.
But it actually makes sense, though.
When you think about a trace memory game that you're a bit of a part is part of the package, admittedly, like half of it, but a trace memory game that didn't get localized, and Endless Ocean coming back, if you kind of squish them together a bit, it's a bit Disaster Day of Crisis.
If you take some very powerful drugs squint really hard, you end up with Master of Illusion coming to Switch. Yes.
I've said that, my prediction was that Monolith would be doing Xenoblade Chronicles X and bringing that to Switch, but I think I was actually wrong, and it's Disaster Day of Crisis, and it was right there in front of me all along, and I just missed it.
What if Disaster Day of Crisis, the earthquake machine is part of the attack from the aliens?
Yeah.
It's all connected. It's all connected.
Or what if it's Disaster Day of Crisis 2?
What?
Disaster Month of Crisis, maybe? Week of Crisis?
It's got with 28 days, 28 weeks
days
later, and so on,
Disaster... I mean, honestly, they could have called it Disaster Console Lifespan of Crisis.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's stuff that they could... I mean... I don't know what the fuck to do with Star Fox Zero.
No, I don't think there's much to do with that.
We haven't gotten a remake of Star Fox 64 officially in a while. Obviously, Star Fox Zero is
12 years.
Star Fox Zero is very on the nose.
It's very heavily patterned on it. Yeah, and let's not forget, Star Fox 64 is in many ways a sort of remake of the first game. So yeah, that's
right.
It's just where Star Fox is just kind of cycling around, at that same point, really. But yeah, it's tough to imagine there's much play in that. You think you'd probably focus more on the brands, that have been successful. I mean, look, it's so. You've been so Mario dominated, hasn't it? The past so. You think about what we're talking. We talk about Mario versus DK in February, Peach in March. Then we're going to be talking about Paper Mario 1000 Year Door HD in May, and Luigi's Mansion in June. You know, it's very clear the sort of overhang of the movie last year and the Super Mario Brothers Wonder. It just kind of feels
it's all related.
Ride those coattails, and you know that's where I think the Zelda stuff would really make sense, because it does have some of that going. Maybe not to, you haven't had a $1 billion movie or whatever. We'll have to wait for that, of course, but.
Every time they talk, it sounds worse.
It did have, Tears of the Kingdom last year, so it just makes sense to have something kind of, with that sort of slipstream. Whether it's like plays even remotely like it is not really the point. How much does the Luigi's Mansion play like Super Mario Brothers Wonder? But it's still those characters, that brand, something recognisable. I think that's going to be that. The sort of certainly for like the biggest title, that they'll have. Although again, we've seen them, even in previous years, when the Switch was younger, where like Metroid Dread was like one of the biggest games at the end of the year. Right. Because again, they don't, as was mentioned in the email, they've got all this money in the bank. They've had all this success. Like, they don't, as much as clearly, again, it's malpractice, it's opportunity cost, and not try and capitalize on the Switch user base that you have to some extent. But at the same time, they with the amount of success they've had, the money they've got in the bank, they don't have to do anything, and even, to the same point about, it'll be Q1 2025. A lot of the time we assume that, because of the need to have something to get a bump at the end of the fiscal year, right? And that's where, when we were talking all the way back about when Switch going to come out, it was like, it's not going to go beyond March of 17, because
no, never.
They need something to, as much money as they had in the bank back then, which they did, because they've always been
it's a pittance compared to what they have now.
It's sure they've added to it a great deal, but they still had a lot back there because they don't make losses really. You know what I mean? Like right. They've had some lean periods where they've had to make adjustments and stuff, but certainly, Pokemon has helped a lot over the years, which I'm still surprised that right now we're looking at a back half of the year without a some sort of relatively like mainstream Pokemon game, but spin-offs are still, on the table, I'd say, in that regard. But the point is, back when they launched Switch originally, it kind of did have to come out then. They couldn't really wait much longer. They were in such a bad period, and, the revenue was down. They needed to start getting it up again. They needed to start building confidence again.
In that fiscal year too.
Yeah.
Like they needed to see positive numbers at the end of the year.
Again, the imperative of that sort is not there in the same way for Q1 2025. No. So, if we're willing to say, it's not coming out this calendar year, does it have to be this fiscal year? Again, in a lot of ways you'd expect it to, I would expect it to, but do I think it's so ironclad that if for whatever reason there were things going on where they just felt like it doesn't actually make sense? I think they could, they're much more at liberty to say, well, if it doesn't make sense, then we'll bump it into another year rather than a fiscal year, rather than, whatever's going on, hell or high water, this thing has to go, which was much more what you were looking at in 17.
Yeah. So I think they will flesh out the back half of their release calendar. I don't think it's going to be anything that's going to shock us unless we find out that the system and its successor are forwards compatible. Then I think you could see some software that's more involved because they'd be like, well, we want to try to be able to collect margin on the software with the larger audience, but also we want to offer something to entice people to sell the hardware. But you have to remember that unless your hardware is absolutely fucking failing, Wii U, you don't really have to sell your first couple of batches of hardware. Like, you're going to have enough of an excited audience who just wants to own the new hardware that you just get that one for free. It's like a couple months in after supplies have maybe stabilized, maybe more than a couple, maybe more like 5 or 6. And people start seeing them on shelves when they're not planning to see them. Like, they're not camping out at Target because they know Target gets their shipment of Switch successors on Tuesday nights. These are just people who just see them average consumer who sees them has the disposable income to buy one and says, yeah, I'll buy that. That's the stuff we care about, because the other stuff those ones that during that initial wave, they'll sell everything. So like making sure you have enough software to make the word of mouth good is more important than trying to move hardware.
Yeah, because you gotta build and sustain momentum from that, which you said, that part of it is almost assured, not quite, I guess, but especially when you're coming off a pretty successful system, you'd like to think that part of it is assured. But again, they've had their issues with this before, so I would imagine at very least there should not be complacency about that part of it. So yeah, I think they will regard it as essential that they have the software that's gonna, carry that momentum from the early people buying, that are just excited to buy new Nintendo hardware when it's, as we've already mentioned on previous episodes, it's relative, it's not really something that, the Nintendo loyalists have been through before, to this extent, like just this long without some like more genuinely new Nintendo hardware to buy than, well, it's got an OLED screen now. Like that, it really is quite unusual. So I think there's pent up demand, and that shouldn't be a problem. It's how you transition that into the broader populace that can be persuaded to buy. But it's, like you say, you got to have that word of mouth, and you've got to have the compelling software.
Yeah, exactly. And like I could see for the end of this year, I could see something like a Fire Emblem game, not necessarily a big one.
Yeah, something from one of the less popular series.
And Fire Emblem would be a good example, because we got one it'll have been about 2 years ago at that point. It wasn't super well received, but it was developed internally, whereas a lot of other Fire Emblem games hadn't been recently. So like there's some possibility there of like, hey, here's a game. It's a remake. It's, it's like Shadows of Valentia. It's a remake. And it's a pretty big remake, because we're remaking a really old game that was like an NES game or a BS SNES game, or something that people haven't played, don't have access to anymore. And here it is, fully remade, modernized, etc., and completely outsourced. Not so hypothetical. Like we could see a sports game. We could see stuff like that, stuff that they don't have to make internally, because that's who you want making stuff while you're trying to set yourself up for success in the future. Like, put your resources on your long bets and your short bets, or your placeholder bets. You just got to you always have, if you're going to sit at the table, you always got to throw a little bit of chips in. So
get that number again, 188 Gambler.
That's right. Exactly. Call them and ask them about the Switch successor. It's better that you're putting resources that you probably wouldn't have on task for big tentpole titles anyway. Well, Tecmo Koei is definitely one of those. And we know there's an Namco Bandai team that's only job is to make Nintendo stuff.
Yeah, no, that you got to think there's probably a project somewhere. They've been working on something that could well be filling out this back half of the year. I guess one of the interesting points as well is how are they, dovetailing with a question that we had recently, that was about the way that, are they going to keep just like doing little bouts of announcements and videos for games rather than doing big directs based on them? Yes, the first half of this year is accounted for at this point with, so the next 3 months. So presumably at some point in the next 3 months, and it might well be more towards the back half, because
in summertime.
With June, I mean, now that Keely's gloating about the fact that he's seen off E3 or whatever. Like, when is that Games Fest or whatever exactly? Yeah,
it's in June. I think it's early-ish June.
So you would expect, and of course, that the June game is Luigi's Mansion, but still, you would think at least at that point you need to start talking about, well, what's going to be in July or August, or not even necessarily like the holiday quarter stuff wouldn't have to be, but if you wanted to keep it really close to the vest.
June 7th.
Yeah, it's June 7th. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So you would think that would be, a particular point where it's like, okay, how much do they want to share at that point, and how big is the time horizon for it, and that'll be interesting to see. If are they really going to just keep this super narrow up until presumably at some point, if there was going to be hardware in Q1 of 25. You would have to have a bespoke announcement, timeline and everything that I think would not be dependent on Summer Games Fest or anything like that. But do you just keep things really close to the chest until that point, which could be deeper into the calendar year?
I could see once the games they've got coming out, except for Luigi's Mansion 2, because that one's so tight. I could see once the games they've got coming out before that, maybe post 1,000 Year Door, doing a couple announcements for things happening in late June, early July. And then around summer, remember last year they did their stuff a few days off from the Summer Games Fest cadence. They were kind of on their own timelines, but their timing was clearly related to the old E3 schedule, which of course Summer Games Fest is scheduled when it is because that's the old E3 time slot. But they weren't necessarily beholding themselves to Jeff Keighley's schedule. Sometime in that early to mid-June, I expect them to announce, like I said, they could have already announced their July play, but September, October, November. And which is a reasonable play for them at that point. Because they don't usually launch much in December unless it's a game that's really coming hot, like your Xenoblade X.
No,
where it's
October,
December 7th.
October tends to be when you get the bigger. Again, a few years ago, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, I think was quite late November, wasn't it? But yeah, a lot of the time, their own stuff, it's kind of October is really kind of the big year, Super Mario Bros. Wonder was around then, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's the ideal, really, because then you can at least get some marketing around games ahead of, Black Friday, Cyber Monday kind of thing.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So,
and the dates have marched up on those sales so much.
That's the thing. It used to cut it a lot closer. They would be November releases for that purpose, but now it just feels like that all of that's just moved up into October, and they've moved with it.
And there's retail theory for that because they've realized that there's only so many bites of the apple that retail gets writ large. So it's better for you to do your sales early so people spend their money with you and not with somebody else. And so there's been this weird pressure to move your date up, move your sales up. So you grab that audience that is okay, I've got a budget, I'm going to spend it, I need to buy gifts for these people. Oh, there's a big sale going on here. Let me check it out. I bought these gifts. Okay, I'm done shopping. And so the earlier you are in the game, the less likely it is you get scooped by somebody else, which is probably unhealthy. But, it's kind of why all these things come out in October. You'd have to really be fucking around to get pushed all the way into October by your competitors.
Yeah, and also, just once you get into the holiday season, people start taking vacations and stuff like that, right? Just from that sort of standpoint as a business, it gets harder to support launches like that over the holidays. So you really want to get everything out by October. Yeah.
So I think we'll skip the other email. I think we'll just kind of wrap with this one. I expect we're going to see some stuff. There'll be some cool stuff because they're not stupid. I don't think we're going to get late Wii U era where it's just nothing is coming out. It'd be Tokyo Mirage Sessions, and then we wait 3 months for the next game.
Oh, well, and again, obviously they did, speaking of the Prime 4 scenario, they did kind of dig themselves a bit of a kind of grave with, with the desperation of the early days of Wii U. Showing everything that they had in the pipeline, it then made it more sort of likely that, that you almost had to follow through on some of this stuff, even though they knew it wasn't going to sell, like Tokyo Mirage Sessions, even, Xenoblade X, which is a fantastic game. But, obviously, I'm sure they kind of knew in a way that it was sending it out to die. Like, because it's relative to the amount of work that went into it. Like, he was never going to justify that with the amount that it was going to sell. Because it was the end of 15, you know? Yeah. Like, yeah, admittedly, we had an entire year plus to wait until you get a new system, which was really fucking dead after that. But even at that point, it was dead, and they knew it. It was sad, you know, that you've got to, but you kind of had to, right? Like, what else were you going to do? It's just, you'd shown this game years earlier. You'd promised it, you know, what else are you going to do with it at that point? But they had, it was a grim follow through, you know, grim obligation with some of that stuff. However good the games were, like, I played Xenoblade X, I loved it. I played Tokyo Mirage Sessions, I like that too. It's quite good, but just, you know, in terms of like commercially, they knew it was doomed.
Yeah, my beautiful creation that nobody will ever play. Live.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You are now free. See you again on a future console.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us this week. Emails go to rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. Greg, there was some music stuff you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, well, so it's a bit belated, but as this should be being published right at the very end of March, and it was the case. I did consider this a few weeks ago, but in March, the NWR, Nintendo World Report, the website that this podcast is a product of, it became 25 years old. It was quite a milestone, really. So yeah, the sort of date that was celebrated in the past as being the sort of inception of the site was March 7th. So it was a few weeks ago, and it just occurred to me, you know, something about that day. I was like, is this the anniversary now? And I came pretty close to, like, I think it is. And, you know, I've got a good suggestion for the music that could coincide with that. So, you know, maybe I'll go with that. And then I'll think better of it. You know, if it is, I want to take a bit more time to think of something appropriate for a big milestone like that. And it was a good job I did, because when I sort of actually then took the opportunity to look into it further, I was able to establish that, yes, you know, March 7th was the date that we celebrated before, but also the suggestion that I had in mind, I had already used 15 years earlier when myself and James recorded a 10th anniversary sort of special episode of RFN with Johnny, who was hosting at that point, and Billy Berghammer, who was the founder of the site, who came on to talk about the old days. Basically, you won't hear, if you go back to that episode, it's remembrance of things past. So you can thank Johnny for the literary reference there. But you won't hear very much of James and myself. Billy was there to talk about the old days with Johnny and all that. So yeah, that's if you want to learn more about the site history and all that, I can certainly recommend that. Obviously, back in 2009. But yes, it was in March of 1999 that the first iteration, I believe, was with Planet N2000, which latterly became Planet GameCube. When the GameCube was announced as the name, and then eventually that transitioned to Nintendo World Report after the GameCube was faded into obsolescence, and Wii, and the Wii and DS era sort of gave us that particular name that's endured to this day. But yeah, so the music I had in mind back then, which I recreated 15 years later, which was kind of simultaneously reassuring and disturbing that I'd be that mechanical, predictable. I don't know, even being very much older, was the overworld theme from Super Mario Brothers 2. A remix of it, OC remix called Super Buck 2, which was, I liked it because, for two reasons. Number one, I believe it was on one of the famous Planet GameCube E3 DVDs back in the day at some point, where, you'd actually get to see, because like streaming video wasn't a thing very much, right, in the early aughts. So, this was a chance to actually see the Nintendo executives come up and talk about, what the plans and, to see the footage being shown on stage and all that, you didn't get basically just from browsing the internet back then. So there was that, but also, of course, the first reviews that were on NWR were GBA reviews, back when it was Planet GameCube.
Including by...
Oh, well, yes, yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. But, it's like Super Mario Advance was, like the launch game in many ways, as well as the F-Zero that I spoke about earlier in the episode and stuff. And then, like, in the West, like, Castlevania was a launch game, and that's what I had with my GBA as well as F-Zero and stuff. But, yeah, of course, Super Mario Advance is a remake of Super Mario Bros. 2. So it's like, oh, yeah, that's perfect. But I'd already fucking used it, hadn't I? So I've been casting around for ideas, like I can't come up with anything as good. What should I do? So I enlisted TYP's help, which I want to mention because I failed to do this last week. There's a new episode of Radio Trivia Podcast Edition, which you should definitely listen to. I'd say it's probably a little easier than some episodes in terms of, I think the games are more gettable, even if you haven't played some of them, but all excellent stuff. So you should definitely listen to that. But yeah, I cast around. I asked James, what your thoughts on it.
And what game did I land on?
Which one of John's GBA games was it?
Well, no. What was the first game I recommended? What was it?
Oh, the first one was Super Mario Advance. Yeah, I hadn't told James this bit yet about how I'd already followed in my own footsteps, and that was James's suggestion. That was reassuring, actually. That it's like, I've not been barking up the wrong tree for a decade and a half.
Because it is literally the first review on the site.
It is, yeah, and that was definitely that. I mean, I don't know. I probably mentioned this over the years, maybe even in that episode with Billy. But, there is a way in which my whole involvement with NWR goes back to NFL Quarterback Club, which is that basically that had that was like in the really early days of me being online. I had that game, and on the back it had a review quote from IGN.com. Which, N64.com, I should say, which later became IGN. And, I was like, oh, N64.com, that's the thing. I should look at that. And, ended up reading, N64/IGN, and Planet N2000 was an IGN affiliate. And that's how I ended up reading that. And, the review ended up being on staff, and the rest is history. So, that's how far back, some of this goes. But really, I'd say those early GBA reviews were a big part of this, especially import coverage, all that kind of stuff. That's what really got me reading regularly.
John, do you by chance remember what your first review on the site was?
Oh my God, I don't. That would have been, probably 99. I think.
Really?
It would have been, I think so.
So we are missing content then.
I don't know.
Yeah, we could sort of dredge up the GBA games. But
are you looking?
You know what it is? Oh, because remember the database got blown up back in the early 2000s.
Well, that
got recreated.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I originally started. I wasn't even writing at that time. I think the first site I think I was ever actually on staff with was the 64 Source. I think.
Right.
And I think Max was running that. Maybe.
Did that sounds correct?
Yes.
Max
yeah,
Lake,
and then
right.
Max Lake, and then I think he joined. I was never actually on staff for Planet N2000. I did join Planet GameCube. I think, I think right in between that, I think I went from 64 Source to maybe Nintendojo.
Yes. So what John is talking about here is that all these sites kind of merged into each other.
Yeah.
Some of them, their content came over. Some of them, it's really just the staff bailed on one and went to the other.
Yeah.
So Nintendojo, I remember Nintendojo being around. I don't think we inherited any of their content.
No, but they were, at that time, they were definitely an IGN affiliate, and I actually went to E3 1999 as of technically on staff. I don't really think I ever did much, maybe a couple of reviews there. Maybe. but I went there kind of under their banner.
Nobody would do that now.
No, I mean I got their press. Like that's how I got a press pass. I got a press pass through them. So
gotcha. So I will give it to you. So is this relevant to the music you're going to pick, Greg?
No, I in the end, you know what?
Okay.
I decided I wanted to go even further back. I was like, let's go all the way back to 99. But
so then I will give you this, John. Your first review on NWR, at least as far as NWR is aware of, and what I suggested to Greg, well, are two different things. So your first review is Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow for the GBA, all the way back in 20 years ago. Okay. But I suggested to Greg we go with your second, which was Shrek 2 for the GBA.
Shrek 2.
Which is which I believe is a Lost Vikings game, which is very funny because your third is Lost Vikings for the GBA.
Yeah. The notorious one is Spiderwick Chronicles, where I actually got that game, and I didn't review it for like a year.
That was after you were on this show.
Yeah,
and it was more than a year. It was
in the
like
podcast
3.
era. Yeah, but because I was trawling through all this stuff, I found a preview you wrote, John, for Castlevania: Circle of the Moon, which that got very serious consideration for the end music because it's got really nice end credits. But it's probably a little bit too somber for me for this account. You know, it was something that's got that kind of similar vibe to the Mario music. You know, kind of fun, silly. You know, kind of celebratory. But I was reading it thinking like, there is no fucking way I didn't read this back then. Like I was so up for Circle of the Moon because obviously I was a huge Castlevania fan, but I didn't have Symphony of the Night because I was just on Nintendo hardware. Having an import N64 and importing those games was very expensive. My family was not going to spring for a PlayStation and Symphony of the Night on top or anything like that back then. So the idea of like, we're getting, portable Symphony of the Night on GBA at launch was so exciting. So it was funny to read that and think there is almost no way I haven't read this before because I was so wired into reading the coverage of that back before it came out, and that, like I said, I didn't get Super Mario Advance at launch. So it was Castlevania and F-Zero. That's what I went with. But for all that, I thought, you know what? Let's make this more of a time capsule type thing. So what was going on in 1999? Not 2001. I mean, I know it sounds kind of minor now, but like that was quite an eventful couple of years. And,
yeah.
Especially in the life of Nintendo and the games industry, all that, things were changing so fast back then. But yeah, in 1999, this is something that not that closely related to my pick, but I think it just sums up like the state of Nintendo, like at this point, how different it was back then. Like it was a big year for Pokemon. And when I say that, I mean that Gold and Silver came out in Japan, Yellow came out in America, and Red and Blue came out in Europe. So that's like 3 separate, like you've got the original generation, you've got its sort of, refreshed third game, and then the sequel generation all coming out somewhere in that year, but, all at different times, different places. Just obviously Pokemon was blowing the fuck up at that time, yes, but it just shows you how much like everything was, you're juggling all these different sort of schedules that all the different regions were on, and now, Pokemon games have been completely synchronous for like a decade. It's quite a time capsule in itself. But my actual pick is for what would have been like the last like big first party release before Planet End 2000 would have gone online, which is the Wario Land 2 for the Game Boy Color. So this is that it came out the year before as a plain old Game Boy game, and again, really, you got to think it's got Pokemon to thank for the idea that they're like, let's re-release, let's launch that again. Instead of just being a plain old Game Boy game, now it's going to be a Game Boy Color game, which I think was like a black cartridge that would work with both, I think. Whereas like when you got to Wario Land 3, I think it was just exclusive to that. But, I really like Wario Land 2. I've been a while since I played any of these. But I think it might be my favourite of the Wario Land games. It's got it introduces the kind of immortal Wario, concept, but, I don't know whether it just balances out a little bit more to my liking than it is in 3. But a fantastic game. Hopefully it will be on NSO pretty soon. The third one is.
One day.
The third one is, but for whatever reason, the second one is not. But yeah, it is the end credits theme from that, which is called The Journey Home. And yeah, if you're imagining something that's like the Wario version of the ending of Super Mario World, that's it. Yeah, it's kind of coming back after all that stuff. And that really strange, like branching timeline level structure that's like completely unique. Like, it's almost like Hyrule Historia stuff as like a level. So the Wario fails timeline. It's
Jesus.
So strange, but I absolutely...
Isn't that every Wario timeline?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's true. So just all variations on that, but no, it's
how Wario failed.
It's such a creative game. I really hope that pops up soon.
I thought you were headed to Donkey Kong 64, which was November of that year.
And was picked by John in our 10-year retrospective feature as the likely winner if there'd been one of a Game of the Year for the site. If
absolutely. Existed. Absolutely.
You've been honest, you've been candid of like, this is probably what would have got picked because it reviewed really well for all the shit.
Yeah, it reviewed really well, and I mean, it certainly hasn't aged well. But at that time, everybody was loving those rare 3D platformers. Everybody was going crazy over them.
Sold really well, considering it had an expansion pack bundled in with it just because there was a bug they couldn't fix, and therefore jacking up the price.
Amazing.
Like, it sold shockingly well. And also the N64 was not super popular. It was not as popular as Super Nintendo.
I have a counter with what might have won it, which is Tony Hawk Pro Skater came out that year.
That's a good shout as well.
Yeah.
So that had at least a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. That's going to do it for us this week. And bye, everybody.
Later.
Another quarter century. Well, yeah, this is
God. No problem.
I'm not planning on making it that far.
You aren't.